All right, I started the recording, so welcome to our, what is this, week 7 now? Week 7. And just about halfway through, well, technically, but. All right, welcome to our continued journey in database and database management. So let me share my screen, make sure I get the right screen to share. All right. All right, can you all see my PowerPoint? Whoops. Let's do this.
I don't see the PowerPoint. I just see like a
The
dark
big,
screen.
big blob. Can you see the
Yeah.
PowerPoint now? Um,
Yes.
Thank you. So I need to show my. Hold on just a second. Agree. I can do this. I am stop. Zoom. All right. Let me check the participants again to make sure I'm not losing anyone. Yes, I'm stalling a little bit. In case you're wondering. All right. Trying to get my camera view over here. So it's a part of the recordings. How's everyone doing? Doing okay?
Hanging in there.
Hanging in there? Still doing good in class, right? Oh, wait, someone else came in. Let's check. All right. Too many things to do. 10 minutes. Okay, let's get started. And then, let's get this to where I like it to be. All right, we'll just keep it there. And you all can hear me and see my little slide deck, correct? I know I asked that before, but
I don't see the slide deck anymore.
you don't?
Nope. You stopped sharing.
I don't know what's going on with this stupid application. All right. Let's try this again. Okay. Now, can you see my slide deck?
Yes, I can see it now.
Yay,
I can see it too.
I can do a couple things right every now and then. All right. Okay, here we go, week 7. For this week, we're going to begin our conversation about group functions. We just went through joins, a lot of fun. And now we're going to talk about group functions. So our objectives for this week, define and give an example of the 7 group functions: sum, average, count, min, max, standard deviation, and variance. I can tell you that I think I only use standard deviation once. I've never used variance in my experience, but that doesn't mean it's not useful. So, and all of you statistics people, you know, or even data collection and research people, you know that you're doing quantitative study. Those two are very important. Anyway, I digress. Construct and execute a SQL query using group functions. Construct and execute group functions that operate only with numeric data types. All very important. One second. All right. All right, so why do we need this? What if you were writing an article for the school newspaper, and I know this is like high school, right? And you wanted to know the average age of students at your school. Probably don't really care about that much anymore, but you could ask each student their age, and add these numbers and then divide by the number of students. We all know the formula for average. That would be one way, very slow and difficult way. What if you had an immediate deadline? You might have a problem. Yuck, yuck. So what if each student's date of birth was in a database? It would be so easy. Then, yeah, I don't write these purposes, so they just come out of the ether of Oracle. So, all right. All right, Vera, thanks for letting me know. So we're going to learn about the power of group functions in Oracle. So, okay, here we go. In SQL, the following group functions can operate on a whole table or specific group of rows. It depends on how you restrict or limit your results. Each function results in one result. Remember that. So you have the add. We saw these in the objectives, but these 7 functions are the basic group functions within SQL: average, count, min, max, sum, variance, and standard deviation. That's the alpha order, in case you were wondering. All right, so here's a basic query. We're just selecting the salary, right? We know there's going to be 20 rows in the result. If we wanted to run a max or see the highest salary, and basically we would run the syntax this way: select max salary. Now it's a function, so usually with a function, you enclose the column name that you want to operate the group function on. And even though it's returning 20 rows, it's actually selecting, you know, who makes the most. And as you see, that 24,000 is the max salary. Very simple example, but that's how it works. And if we wanted to do the same with min, we see that the 15th result is 2,500. That's the minimum or the lowest salary. And please make a note of the syntax. It's pretty straightforward. And note again, there's only one result from that select statement. And max salary and min salary. All right, so if we wanted to do the sum, and basically it will sum all 20 rows of the return of that column salary into one. So this is the sum where all the salaries added together. 175,500. That's what the company comes up every week. Or is it week or month? Every month. And if we want to do the average salary, the average monthly salary for the employees in our little company is $8,775. So remember, it's taking those 20 rows and adding them up and, dividing that by, well, adding them up, dividing it by 20. Simple formula. All right. So that's the sum and the average. Now count simply is used to count the number of rows. Now you can use and there's something unique about group functions, and I'll tell you later. But if you put a specific column, we know that there's 20 rows in this column. So count is just a count. It will count the number of rows. Variance is a formula, statistical formula. It basically, and you can only use this on numeric data. We'll talk about that later, but it calculates the spread of data around the mean. And you don't really need to worry about that if you know what the mean is. And it's not necessarily the average, and I'm not going to provide you a statistical lesson, but know that the definition is the spread of data around the mean. And it does give you a nice little long, complicated number here with several places to the right of your decimal. So, and does that make sense for salary? Can you use that? Well, not really, unless you're doing some statistical analysis. So for example, if the average grade for a class on a test is just giving you an example of variance was 82%, and the scores range from 40 to 100%, the variance of the scores would be greater than if the range was 78 to 80%, 88%. So that's what variance is. So you're not going to be tested on that particular statistical analysis, but know that it's essentially a calculation of the spread of data around the mean. So you can impress your friends with that information, or maybe you can, win a trivia test question. Anyway, all right, a standard deviation is a little bit different. It's very similar, but the standard deviation is the measure of the spread of the data. Now, yeah, once again, it seems like it kind of makes sense, but so if you have two sets of data with approximately the same mean, the greater the spread, the greater the standard deviation. That gives me a headache, so I'm going on. All right, so that's about all I'm going to say about variance. It is a group function, and if for some reason you need to calculate those particular aspects of your data or a column, there you go. If you need to use that, if some auditor says, well, we need to know the variance, well, there you go. See how high it is. But anyway, enough of that. All right, so the where clause you can also use in your group functions, or I said that wrong. Actually, the where clause cannot be used as a filter in your group functions. There's a particular reason why. Basically, there's a way to restrict your results, but the where clause is not used. So if you ran, meaning you can't use a where clause with a group function, I should clarify that. So if you ran this particular select, this last name, first name from employees where salary is equal to the mean salary, well, first of all, that wouldn't really make sense unless someone is getting, or the minimum salary, well, I guess theoretically the query makes sense, but you can't run that. Basically, you'll get an error message saying the group function is not allowed here. So you can't put it on the right side of your conditions in a where clause. All right. And that was a long way of saying that. All right, let's go through some examples. So we saw this before, but we're going to use some context in it. So if we wanted to select the minimum life expectancy at birth, and you do have this in that WF countries. So the minimum life expectancy in the WF countries, yeah, 32 years. That's pretty young. I'm glad I don't live there. I'd be already dead. Anyway, I'll stop being morbid. All right, the minimum, and yes, you can use this on alpha. And basically, whenever you're using min and max, it's just the alpha order. So the min of the country names from WF countries and Quilla, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's essentially the first country that's listed in WF countries. And then you can use it for dates. It's the earliest date. The min represents the date that's earliest listed in your database. So that's the usages of min. Noting that you can use min on both numeric, string, varchar, and date data types. Just make a note of that. Right. Now max is the same way. You can use it on the same data type. So the maximum life expectancy in our WF countries is 83. That makes me feel a little bit better. So I think I'm getting there, but at least I'm not dead yet. So, and then country name, Western Sahara. That's basically the last country, the last in the alpha listing. And then the dates in our database, the last date in there is January 29, 2000, if that was a higher date. So, and once again, max can be used in all of those data types, numeric, string, and date, or varchar and date. All right. All right, sum is only used, and you probably figured this out already. But these group functions that do calculations, they can only be used on numeric data. Please remember that. You cannot use sum on date or string data. So in our example here, select sum area, and that's a numeric data type from WF countries or the region ID. So this is basically calculating the sum of all the area in that region, whatever that region points to. So it's 241,000 square feet or whatever. And then if we want to perform a salary for a specific department, you see, once again, that's a numeric data type. Remember, sum is a calculation on numeric data types only. All right. And average also, numeric data types, average area in that region, 9,656.96, probably square feet, and average salary. And I don't know if, hopefully you remember this whole syntax, you're just rounding it to the two decimal places to the right of the dot, which is the comma 2 and the round. You're rounding it, the average, and yes, you can, that's a nested function, and hopefully you remember that, but it's just presenting this particular format for our salary, 19,333 for that department. That seems a little high. All right, group functions and null. This is important. Group functions ignore null values. In the example, null values are not used to find the average of commission percentage. If you ran this query, select, where's my cursor? Average commission percentage, it's only going to test 4 values. This is why you get that 0.2125. Even though we have 20 entries, remember that. The group functions will ignore null values. So if you do the quick calculation in your head, I know you're all math wizards, you see that these 4 added together, divided by 4 will equal that 0.2125. All right. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Please remember that. Null values have no value. So you can run more than one group function, within, even on one column, as you see here. But you can run more than one group functions in your select statement. So we have max salary, min employee ID from employees. So that's where you get this 103 and 900 maximum salary and minimum salary from that department. We all see that. We're just looking at that one department, and the first employee is 103, and the minimum salary and the maximum salary in that department could be used in a report. All right. So those group functions, that's kind of a synopsis of the group functions. Remember, there's some rules. The big one, this one always trips up individuals getting started in database. The group functions ignore null values. Please remember that. That can trip you up a little bit. You cannot use a group function as far as you're filtering in your where clause. There's another way to do that. We will talk about that later. Remember, min, max, and count can be used on any data type. Some have variance and standard deviation or numeric data types only because they're calculations. All right. You can go ahead and try to do a variance on a string data type or a date. It'll give you an error. All right. So that's our down and dirty for group functions. You have 7 of them. Average, count, max, min, standard deviation, sum, and variance. Pretty straightforward, right? Let me just check the attendance right quick. We have a couple people that didn't make it. All right. Simple. So in this lesson, we looked at the 7 group functions. We looked at all kinds of examples of queries. And we essentially isolated the big functions that can only be used on numeric data types. Any questions before we move immediately into our second topic on group functions? Make sense? No problems? All right, good job. Okay, on to topic 2. And this is specifically, we're going to flesh out a little bit count, distinct, and we're going to look at NVL. Do y'all remember what is NVL? Who can give me a little 1-sentence blurb of what NVL, if you can remember? I know this is, you're tagging your long-term memory or short-term memory or whatever. Do we all remember what NVL is? Yeah, it's kind of an acronym, but not really an acronym, but there's a reason. Oh, Vera raised her hand. Go ahead, unmute and tell us.
It converts a null value to a known value. So like let's say, you have a date or a character or a number, you replace it with something that is not null. So if the number is unknown, let's say you use 0.
Great, that's exactly right. Good job. And you didn't even have time to chat GPT that, so I'm really proud of you. You're using your notes. All right, so that's what NVL is. But our objectives for this topic, we only have to construct and execute a SQL query using the count group function and use distinct and NVL function with group functions, NVL functions. Well, that's bad English. All right, so why do we need this? The process of aggregating or grouping together data using SQL functions enables businesses to calculate cumbersome problems. Remember the example to count all the students, the daunting, boy, that's misspelled, daunting. Does that word mean anything? Should be daunting. I'll change that later. There's just not enough hands to accomplish it manually. Fortunately, SQL has these group functions and they will definitely help. All right, count, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's just count, and the expression is usually either literal or a variable, which we don't use, or it's just a column. There's a wild card, and we'll talk about that later. And the count, remember, returns the number of non-null values in the expression column. So in our employees table, we know that we have 20 employees, small company. We run a count job ID, we will get the number 20. 20 rows, we know are listed in the employees table. But if we run a count of, so if we run a count of the commission percentage, what will the number return? We just went through this. What will be the result? Is it going to be 20?
4.
It's going to be
4.
4, right? And we remember why, right? group functions ignore null values. So if you're wondering why the number is 4, that's, yeah. So it's just a reiteration. All right. If you wanted to count all rows, and this is what I was referring to earlier, you can run a count star on your table. The star is a wildcard. This particular group function will count the number of rows no matter what. So even if there's nulls, it still will count the number of rows because it essentially counts the records in that table. So for example, how many employees were hired before? If you wanted to do that, this count star can be used and you would add a where condition. Now I notice we're using a where condition with the group function, but we're not adding the where condition, or we're not adding the group. Okay, let me take my time. We're not adding the group function in the where clause. Right? You can use the where clause as it's normally used. So since our condition is we're looking for all the employees hired before January 1, 1996, you just go where hire date less than that particular format. And we see that our count will come back with 9. And the key here, there may be some nulls there for some reason. It will count those if they're. That's one of the reasons to use the count star. But generally, use the count star to immediately know how many records are in that table. All right. Distinct is used to essentially eliminate any duplications in your records, in your result. So if we perform a simple search on the job ID from employees, we see that it'll return all 20 rows, right? But there's some duplicates in here. If we're just looking at the different types of employees or jobs in our employees table, we wouldn't get an accurate number here, right? So if we wanted the unique job IDs, we would add the keyword distinct. The key here is that distinct will always follow the select statement. And that becomes confusing if you want to essentially use distinct on multiple columns. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But generally, you want distinct to be associated with a specific column. And there's some rules to it that we'll talk about as we go ahead. But you see here, there's 12 different types of jobs in our employees table. Right, does that make sense to everyone? Look pretty clean. All right. And here's our brief explanation. If we wanted to select more than one column, the query will return non-duplicate combinations. So it's essentially the combination, and this is where it gets confusing. So it's looking at the distinct combination between job ID and department ID. So you see here, now there's an additional column added because there's a sales rep that does not have a department. So, and in some instances that becomes confusing because you think it should return both distinct values for the job ID and the department ID. It's the combination of the two selected columns. Does that make sense to everyone? Barring my color scheme here. It's just mapping out how that particular function, that group function is utilized. So if you look at this, you notice that there's no duplicates exist. That's the combination between the job ID and department ID. Even though there's duplicates in the columns. And that's what I was trying to say. See, there's duplicates in the columns. Well, the department ID column, there's definitely duplicates, but there's not duplicates across the columns. And there shouldn't be duplicates. Well, you see if there are duplicates because this sales rep here, but that's sales rep and 80, this is sales rep and no. And this can be confusing because you're like, well, we're saying distinct job ID. But when you add a different column with that distinct, it's going to look at the combination of the columns. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, you may want to take a look at that, run a couple of the examples to make sure you understand that kind of that association between the columns when you have distinct in there. Because you may be looking at results that you're not expecting. All right, here's some examples. So here, this first query up here on the right, select salary from employees in that department. We see that we have 3. So using distinct makes the function consider non-duplicate values. Let's see, what am I doing here? And as you see here, these 2 queries produce different results. And now we know that this is, if you do the quick math in your head, this is 5,800, right? But so if you select the sum, the department, but if you select the sum distinct salary, now you can all see why, right? It's going to consider the 1,700, even though it's 2 different employees, as duplicate values. So it's only going to add to 2,400 to the 1,700, which is why you get 4,100, which is not necessarily what you may be looking for. So this is an example where you probably don't want to use the distinct to calculate the sum of the salaries in that department. Does that make sense? All right. So that's where you have to be very careful with how you use distinct. Okay. All right, distinct and count. When using distinct with a group function such as count, the result set will return the number of non-duplicate, common values. So we saw this with job IDs, right? Count, distinct, 12. How many different jobs are assigned to employees? We know that's 12. But if we run, and this is where it's can be confusing, but you really need to be you really need to be sure of what you're expecting. So count distinct salary, so there's only 18 different salaries, right? Do we all see that? The difference between these 2, we know we have 20 employees, but there's only 12 different jobs and there's only 18 different salaries. So you just have to remember, what are you looking for as far as your result? And I guess it'll lessen the confusion if you know, because this is telling you that there are 2 employees that are getting exactly the same salary. And then there's only 12 types of jobs that can be listed in a result. All right. Make sense? Okay. And that's why those are different. All right, so sometimes it is desirable to include nulls in group functions. And you're like, why? For example, knowing the average number of customers served each day could be used to judge how much food to order each month. Some days the restaurant is closed and no customers are served, but the owner has found that computing the average by including the days closed is a better indicator than just counting the days with customers. So if you look at these 2 queries, even with commission percentage, now we're just going to use NDL to substitute the nulls, the 16 nulls in there with 0, so that we get a different average as far as the commission percentage. Now this is a little bit different than the restaurant example, but this will give you kind of an indication of how much bonuses are being awarded throughout the company when most of the employers do not receive a bonus. Whereas this average is saying that almost everyone seems to be receiving a bonus. I guess that's how I would interpret that. And that's why that's why you can use NVL, especially with numeric. And this example is kind of weak because commission percentage is so low, which is why this number is so low. But at least that's giving you an idea across the company, saying that most of the employees are not getting a commission percentage. Does that make sense? So that's the only reason why I'm indicating this. I mean, it gives a manager or supervisor, okay, if I want to start awarding more employees a commission percentage, even those outside of sales, or maybe more of the company, you probably want that to approach maybe 1 or some arbitrary value. All right, so that's all I'm trying to illustrate there. It's just definitely using the NVL as Vera stated, substitute those nulls with the value that you would want to be a part of evaluating that particular aspect of your business. And you may have a manager ask you for that, for their particular reason. All right, so that's where NVL can be useful, especially with something like average. Now with something like sum, maybe not as useful because it'll just simply ignore the nulls. So, but average is probably the key one that it will come in handy. So our terminology, aggregate, which means just grouping together, count, expression, count, distinct. Remember the differences between how that's illustrated and then distinct. And then something to note here, remember if you have multiple columns after the distinct, it is going to combine the columns to create a distinct, instance of those columns combined. So just remember what you want to accomplish with your query. And then NVL just substitutes null with a known value, generally for calculation or, even just to make your data look a little bit more realistic. And that's what we did with our topic 2. And before I get there, I'm not going to show you that yet. So what I want to do now is take a look at our requirements for module 7. It's actually not too bad. I will upload, I forgot to upload the lecture. I'm sorry. I know Vanessa and most of you want, I will definitely upload the lecture and the recording in there after we're finished. I'll just tell you, this is the time, this is your easy time. I mean, before it gets really tough, or as far as the amount of work. So I'm kind of lulling you into the spring break mode. So you're like, this class is not so hard after all. Well, don't do that too much because once you come back, I'm just going to slam you with a lot of things. Anyway, so don't think about that now, no panic and all that. And believe it or not, starting right away with a midterm, but don't think about that now. Just enjoy this light week and take a break. And I will see you all on the 24th. Anyway, so the videos, there's pretty good videos in here. Someone had asked about access to the videos. All of these videos are YouTube for the most part. So you can save the links and, library them or whatever you want, or search for them on YouTube. They're all accessible via YouTube. So you will have access to these well after the class is done. All right. So those are the videos, and then the practice queries, our 7 functions. Yeah, you can just dig right into the standard deviation and variance if you like. But I would concentrate more on the sum and the max and the min and all that, and count. But all of these queries will give you a good idea. And there are some ones that you can run on those statistical ones that, well, they'll just give you a headache. So I would say just avoid them unless you're a statistician. And then tons of practice as usual and the solutions. And make sure you go through these because they'll help you with the assignment. The assignment is pretty normal this week. So you have your typical assignment, try it, solve it. Very, very pretty much as straightforward as you can get. You can probably do these in like 10 minutes. It just gives you the scenarios. Make sure you use the right table in the database. I did see that a little bit last week. So there's just 6 of them, 12 points, no extra credit this week. I think most of you got the extra credit last week, but that's fine. So that's the assignment, and then a pretty normal quiz, proof functions and count distinct NVL, 16 points, no extra credit there either. And that's it for this week. So you should all just take care of that and relax right away since it's just Monday. You can take an extended vacation. And so, yes, next week is our spring break week. So I do want to say enjoy your break. We will not meet next week. Yes, another non-meeting, non-lecture day. We will reconvene on the 24th, or excuse me, yeah, on the 17th, excuse me, with now the way that I've structured it, the spring break is actually module 8, in case you were wondering. I'm just trying to keep that order. Don't ask me why. So we will reconvene with module 9, and module 9 is the last module of this portion of the course, and those modules will be covered in the midterm. And I'm just giving you a preview. When we get, even though we move into module 10 of that week, the next week after spring break, only the first 9 modules will be included in the midterm. And yes, I have a very extensive, both a practice session and a review, which is where it gets a little hairy as far as the amount of work. But once again, no need to panic, because it's manageable work, and it's not going to be anything overly crazy. And I don't know, my camera's off. Oops. Who did that? Anyway, hello. So any just ongoing questions? And hey, there's, oh, I forgot your cat's name, Vera. Does anyone remember the cat's name? Don't tell me. Yeah, no. I don't remember. Yeah. Pete? No, that's not right. What's your cat's name?
Yeah, it's Bean.
Bean. Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, sorry. He created a distraction. Thanks, Matthew. You have a better memory than mine. Yeah. All right. Any questions about module 7? Pretty easy, pretty relaxing. Shouldn't be a big issue. And please take a break. Don't think about SQL next week, because it actually gives your brain a level of energy that you'll need for the second half of the semester. So this is your chance to just kind of release and relax. That's what I'm going to do, even though I have to work all week. But yes, I'm not taking a break, but you all get to take a break. All right. Any questions or comments? All good? All right. So remember module 7. You can look ahead. I will probably post the lectures for module 8, or excuse me, not module 8, module 9, well ahead of our lecture on the 17th. But only two topics in module 7. So there you go. Easy week, easy peasy, right? Okay. Well, believe it or not, that's all I have for this week. This will be the shortest lecture for a while. I can just tell you that. So when we get back, you can't be sleepy or anything like that. I'll just have to break out my trumpet and play something really, really poorly to wake you up. All right. Thank you all. I will see you in a couple weeks, 2 weeks. And once again,
Thank you, Professor.
enjoy your break. All right. You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.